All right, let's go now to line number one. Joining us on the MMA Hour right now is Greg Jackson. Greg, how are you?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Obviously, interesting times in the life of Greg Jackson. Now we're removed. Hopefully the storm has gone away a little bit. How are you dealing with all of this? How are you feeling after what happened on Thursday, the things that were said, and obviously the cancellation?
Well, I'm sorry the show got canceled. I'm hoping now that everybody's emotions have settled down a little bit and you can get some distance on the thing. But I think that when it first came out, everybody was very, very emotional. It was kind of one of those things that emotion can override your better judgment or even just kind of a reaction to things. And that's human nature. We're all human and we're all emotional creatures. And hopefully now that's died down a little bit.
Have you ever dealt with a situation like this in your career in MMA?
Yes, pretty much constantly.
So this was just another day in the life.
I wouldn't say that, but we have been, people thought we didn't finish fights, and so we had a lot of flack for that. So that I came out with that list, and sometimes it changed mine, sometimes it doesn't. Before that, we were overrated. So, it's been a constant stream of, since we've been successful. It didn't really happen before we were successful, but since it's been successful, it's been a lot of that stuff.
In hindsight, do you still believe that it was the right call to turn down this fight?
Absolutely. Taking a fight on 3 days' notice, basically. I know everybody says 8 days, but you're really not training that last week. So 3 days' notice against an opponent of that caliber is for me, just not a good idea. And it's not unprecedented. It's not like we're the only ones that did it. It's like we point out pretty consistently, Lyoto, who very wisely I felt turned us down with 3 weeks' notice. So it's not unheard of. It's not like we're doing this incredible new thing that has never been done before. It was done a day or two after again. So it's nothing out of the ordinary, I should say. But what is out of the ordinary is all the emotions that happened there. And I think that's just because everybody was frustrated. From Dana's point of view, he's got a show to run and he's got to put butts in the seat. And that can get really frustrating if you're almost to the show and then it got canceled and then maybe there's hope, but then it got canceled again. You can see how he would get frustrated by that.
So just to be clear, because in my opinion, the most shocking thing that happened, well, not the most, but one of the more shocking pieces of news that came out was Lyoto turning down the fight because a lot of people didn't think he deserved it. I mean, it's 4 weeks at the end of the day, but you're okay with that decision as far as Lyoto is concerned.
Well, yeah, you don't want him to fight if he doesn't feel that he's going to be ready and fully prepared, that I would kind of undermine my own argument. I think that was very reasonable of him to turn it down. And again, he did it just a few days after or a day or whatever it was after we did, and with a lot more notice. But you can't fault him because he wants to be ready to have the best shot he can have as a world title. When you have a world title, it doesn't suddenly exempt you from the rules. The belt doesn't give you like magical powers where now you can fight anybody on 3 days' notice. You're still fighting all the best in the world, and they're very, very good, and you need to be prepared, especially for somebody as stylistically different as Sonnen is from Henderson.
Can you take us through the timeline? When did you find out about this? What did you guys do? And then how long did it take for you to come to the conclusion that this is not in the best interest of Jon Jones?
We found out about, I believe it was Wednesday night. I get hit in the head a lot, so I might forget, but I think it was Wednesday night, and Jon said that Dana get injured and they wanted Sonnen in, and I sat down and thought about it for a while, and then I kind of gave my opinion along with some other coaches and people as to why I didn't think that was a good idea to take that fight on that kind of notice, and which reasons I've stated before, but I felt that he was a completely different style, that he was going to be in shape. I mean, and we found out later that Dan had been injured for 3 weeks before that, so obviously he's been training, and he's a very sharp guy. I actually really like Tail a lot. I think he's a great guy, and he was very smart of him, to train really hard, and maybe he can get in there and bypass the division and get that world title. I thought it was brilliant.
So Dan was on our show earlier, and he said that he never told Chael about this. I mean, that's what he said. Obviously, they're friends and whatnot. You still believe, as does your partner, Mike Winklejohn, he came out with this, that Chael knew about all of this, and he was just preparing and waiting for the right time to sort of attack, if you will?
Well, I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Sonnen that. I'm not sure, but it seemed very coincidental that he started attacking Jon on Twitter, and that all these things kind of were happening at the same time. Certainly, he's been training. I mean, that guy's an animal. I don't know if you've ever seen the man fight, but he's an animal. He's no cupcake at all. And so even in any kind of shape, he's going to be a real threat. Especially, you have talent is great, but you have to be prepared for what these people are going to do, and that's very, very important. And so to say that Jon would walk all over him is a huge, I think, insult to him, and I would never think that. I think that he's very, very tough and very capable of winning.
How did you come to the conclusion that this was like? What did you actually do? Did you just think about it? Did you watch tape? What kind of steps did you take to decide that this was the right call? The wrong call.
Well, I know his style, I know Dan's style, I know the timeline, and I know what Jon has been doing to prepare. So I just took in all the variables that I could, and I meditated on it for a little bit, and then came up with what I think and still do think was the correct decision. But it wasn't just a flash decision. It wasn't a knee-jerk decision. I sat down and tried to carefully consider it.
How long did it take for you to come to that decision?
2 seconds. No, I'm teasing. It was, I don't know, probably about half an hour of maybe, somewhere around there, just sitting and blocking everything else out and thinking on it.
Did Jon fight it, or when you told him your decision, he agreed with you right away?
No, he didn't agree right away because there was a lot of, there were other coaches in there voicing their opinions as well and working through their ideas. And no, Jon wasn't like, absolutely, am I not going to fight him? He was just kind of trying to, he's a smart kid. He was trying to get everybody's input.
Did anyone ever bring up, hey, if you don't take this fight, they're going to cancel the event and all this other stuff is going to happen? Was that ever brought up at any point during the decision-making process?
Not to my knowledge. No, it certainly didn't enter into my decision. And I mean, it would be hard to even base that, you know what I mean? Like, so basically you have to do what we want or we're going to make everybody else suffer I don't think that should have factored into the decision, in my opinion. If it's that important that everybody gets paid and stuff, the UFC has the power to keep that show on. I mean, they might take a financial loss themselves, but I don't think it's fair to blame Jon for that.
And when he told the UFC about his decision, did he ever come back to you and say, hey, look, they're threatening to cancel the event. They're very upset. Should we reconsider? Did you ever have to go through this all over again?
No. I don't. Again, I don't know what was said between Jon and the UFC, but I don't know that still would be. I mean, that's a very tricky area. I think that to use the leverage of every other fighter to make a fighter do what you want, it is a tricky area. And I don't know what was said there, and so I won't speak on it. But I will say that's very tricky.
Did you listen to the conference call on Thursday?
No. I immediately started. I was working. I've got a lot of fighters, and they need help, and I need to help them. And so I was working. No, I started getting calls as to what was going on in the conference call. Have you listened to it since? No. I've heard all the highlights for sure, but I actually haven't listened to it. Not much point in going back over it if I got the high points. Obviously, Dana said a lot of things about you and Jon. Are you surprised? Especially, it's one thing you don't work for him, and he said what he's had to say about you in the past. He's made no secret of his feelings there. But for Jon, his champion, one of the faces of the UFC, all that stuff, were you surprised with some of the things he said about Jon? No, I think, like I said, I think everybody's emotions kind of got the better of them. Not just Dana, but a lot of people, fighters too. And I think that's reasonable. Listen, Dana is very, very good at what he does. He's the best in the world, and you need that fire. The same thing that makes him emotional also gives him the fire to knock on all these executives' doors when people are turning him down time after time, fighting to get us legalized here and there. You need that fire, and kind of the flip side of that fire can be when things don't go your way, you get mad. But I don't hold that against him for myself, because you have to have that passion. You have to have that fire, and it can go out of control or it can, flash a little bit. But if he didn't have that fire, we might not be where we are today, because it gets discouraging, time after time. Remember, the UFC wasn't always like this. It took somebody to really get in there and fight and get discouraged and get up again and fight to get it to where we are. So that's why I'll never say a bad thing about Dana. That sometimes that stuff comes out in the negative, and if I have to bear the brunt of it, then that's what I have to do. But, he's the guy that fire helps him, and we need that. He said you and Jon murdered UFC 151. He called you an effing sport killer, a weirdo. He said a lot of things. You don't hold any ill will towards Dana? No, not at all. For the reasons that I stated before, he's a passionate, fiery guy, and I'm not the kind of guy that takes that kind of stuff personal. If I felt that I was, killing a sport, maybe it has a point about me needing a psychiatrist. He might have a point there, but the rest of them, that stuff's not true. So, I'm not going to get upset by things that aren't true. Like, if I really was out to kill MMA and the very thing that I love, maybe I would get hurt, but it didn't make any sense. And so obviously it was just emotion and I'm not going to, because you kind of need that fire. I'm not going to take that personally.
And for the record, I think he actually said that the people who interview Greg Jackson deserve to see a psychiatrist. So I think that now means that I'm crazy as well. Just clearing that up.
Well, I don't know, but I think anybody involved in this sport, we've got to be a little bit off, just a little bit.
That is true. Why do you think he thinks this about you? Why do you think he believes that you're trying to kill the sport?
I don't know. I think maybe we were both confused. I was confused by his reaction. He was confused by my decision. I'm not sure why, but he was definitely confused by it. And I think that he was frustrated because, again, like I said, from his point of view, the show's canceled. Oh, wait, no, now the show's going to be saved. Oh, now the show's canceled. I mean, that's a very emotional roller coaster to get on. And when you're really frustrated and when you want to assign blame for that, that's an easy thing to do, especially if that fire is really inside of you. And I think it flames out a lot. And I think we were both just kind of confused as to the other's reaction.
He actually said on the conference call that a few days ago, before all this, he talked with you at an event, and you guys were kind of joking about some of the things he said. Well, do you remember this conversation?
Yeah, it was right after the Julie Kedzie fight at Strikeforce. Yeah.
What did you guys talk about?
Well, he was saying because it was another very exciting fight, and he was mentioning that it was a really good fight, and then he was joking about how people say that we don't put on exciting fights, and I pointed out that the week before. Eric Goyo Perez had set the bantamweight knockout record, and then Donald Cerrone, of course, knocked out Melvin. And so we were just laughing about that it's kind of the exact opposite of the reality that's presented is the reality of our team. But he has a good sense of humor about it.
Oh, so at that point, you guys were kind of cool, right?
Yeah, listen, and I'm still kind of cool. I mean, if Dana's not cool with me, that's Dana's decision. But for me, I'm not taking any of this personal. I'm still cool with Dana. People you work with get mad at your decisions. Your friends get mad at your decisions. Sometimes that's life. Your family gets mad at your decisions. That's life. I'm not a negative person. I'm not going to sit around and stew on it and get angry about it. If I get angry, it's going to be for a much better reason than somebody losing their temper.
Do you think that I mean, now with this, I was going to bring it up, UFC 150, Cerrone does what he does, Perez does what he does. I mean, now, do you ever sit down and read the stuff that people write about, the fans and whatnot about your team, and does it just drive you crazy? Can you not even go on the internet? Like, how does someone deal with this when people are throwing things out that just aren't true?
Well, I guess it makes it easy because remember that at some point, even I became an entertainer. I have no desire to be an entertainer, but at some point, that's entertaining because it doesn't have anything to do with logic. But it's the same thing, and I always say this, like when I was a kid, people would hate the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they would hate them. And I was always like, why would you hate people you've never even met before? But that's that team psychology of it's us versus them, and you either love them or you hate them, and that's entertainment. People, they enjoy that. So I don't take much of that stuff seriously because, again, it's not based on this logical framework. It's an emotional decision kind of disguised on this logical framework. You make an emotional decision. I don't like this guy. And then you try to look for reasons not to. And certainly there's a lot of reasons not to like me. Not the most handsome man in the world. And I'm a goofball and a nerd or whatever. But I do what I do, and I love my life, and I love what I do in it. However, if you're going to come at me, that stuff's not going to hold a lot of water. Or the new one, like our champions they fight conservatively, I think, in championship fights as Jon Jones is finishing everybody. Like, you know what I mean? Like, none of the arguments really, it doesn't hold water.
Have you talked or have you seen Jon since all of this happened?
Yeah, we were just working with him today.
How is he dealing with all of this?
Well, I think he's dealing in a similar way because, before this happened, remember that, there were a lot of people that didn't like Jon, again, for those same kind of reasons, that they think they know him, they have this perception of him, and so they make their judgments based on that limited information. And so, they might be more virulent, or there might be more of them now, but it's not like Jon hasn't dealt with everybody being upset at him before. And so, it's not based in logic, so you can say, well, we're sorry. And he kind of put a thing apologizing to everybody. We're sorry people feel that way. We're just doing what we do, and that's kind of the whole thing. But if you sit around and agonize about total strangers hating you, that would be a hard way to live.
So I'm just wondering, for someone who is obviously very intelligent, I respect your opinion very much and the way you view people and your take on things. Why do you think Jon Jones is so disliked now? I mean, I've never seen this in our sport, a champion who's so talented have so much hate coming his way. And this happened way before any of this ever happened. Why do you think people have, in some ways, turned against Jon Jones over the last year?
Well, I think that you want to, it's the tall poppy syndrome, they call it in Australia. I think that when you're really, really good at something, people want to see you fall. And I think that's very in human nature because we're competitive people. And all humans are competitive. And so you kind of measure, even subconsciously, you measure yourself against people. And so it's nice, if you kind of give into that, it's nice to see people fall or whatever. I think there's a little bit of that. I think that understanding that the fans turn left and right. Like for a while, when Anderson had a few what other people consider bad fights, I didn't consider them that bad. I thought they were very artistic, but and that doesn't make my opinion popular, I guess. But there were times where Anderson was, hated by everybody just because he didn't finish a guy or didn't live up to these expectations or whatever. So I think it's not just one factor. I think there's a combination of factors that go into that level of hatred. And then it's like wildfire. As soon as a few people do it, other people will jump on that bandwagon.
Are you a little disappointed that they picked Vitor ultimately to fight Jon and not, say, Chael Sonnen? Like, would you have rather put the Chael Sonnen stuff to bed and have Jon fight him on September 22nd?
No, not really. I mean, it doesn't. I guess the opponents really don't matter to me because I consider we have to fight everybody as long as we do it in a way that's reasonable. And fighting somebody on 3 days' notice isn't reasonable to me. 3 weeks is 4 weeks. That's pushing reasonable, but it can be done. And so as long as it's reasonable, the opponent doesn't matter too much. I mean, we don't really have a number one contendership position. We kind of have a vague sense of it.
Sure.
So, it's kind of hard for me to say yay or nay on that stuff. And again, the UFC is very good at matchmaking. That's one of the things they do incredibly well. So as long as there's a reasonable amount of time in a professional sport for the biggest title in the world, besides the heavyweight title, I guess, if you want to get technical, but it's a huge title and it's a huge sport. And we just want to come at it professionally.
So to be clear, it doesn't matter that it was Chael Sonnen. If it was Machida, Shogun, anyone out there, you would have said no to this fight. It had nothing to do with Chael?
No, yeah, nothing to do with Chael at all. I mean, there's nobody else that really fights exactly like Dan Henderson. If it was closer, maybe it would be more of an option. But none of the 205ers are anything like him. And they're all dangerous and they're all good. And to not respect them enough and to not take them serious, like, okay, we'll fight whoever on 3 days. I mean, it's a very admiral samurai warrior spirit, but, and that's cool, but when you'll fight anybody, but the other part of being a samurai and a warrior and stuff is intelligent fighting and making sure that you're going to give yourself the best chance of winning.
So just curious, why did you even have to think about the decision? Like, why? If that's the stance, I'm sure that's the stance for everything. Why did you go back and mull this over? Was it because so much was on the line or what?
Well, yeah, because I don't want to ever make a snap decision. You know what I mean? There might be avenues that I haven't considered as far as the fight is Jon doing something that we can translate easily to this style? You know what I mean? I'm looking for ways and arguments. And when it comes to any big decision like that, I remember reading Lincoln, who said, you take your time, figure out your decision, make sure that you have the avenues figured out, and then stand behind it. And so I've always tried to follow that advice. He's, a million times smarter than I am. And I figure if that guy was the best ever, then maybe I should emulate his style of the way to do. So I always consider a decision kind of carefully, and then so that it's not, just kind of a flash emotional reaction.
All right. So now your attention turns to Vitor Belfort. Do you feel as though there's enough time to prepare for him?
Yeah, there should be. I mean, Vitor is super tough. I mean, what a great fighter he is. I've worked with him a little bit. He's an amazing guy and a great fighter. And Jon's very talented. And, 3 weeks or so should be enough time to put together a cohesive, plan and training elements to give us the best chance of winning.
You got a crazy week coming up, right? You're going to Manila for Andrei Arlovsky, and then you were supposed to go to, I guess your travel schedule got a little lighter. That's the good news, right?
Right, yeah. I was going to go to Manila, and then Andre was fighting on that Friday, and then Saturday I was going to fly back to Vegas from Manila, and then coach Jon Jones, Kyle Noak, and Henry Martinez.
Jeez.
So now I don't have to do that.
That's unbelievable. And they were okay with that, with you not being there on fight week?
Yeah, because I told them all, beforehand, I won't be there till, Saturday, and sorry, we have other coaches that'll go out with them a little bit, but it was one of those, just a tough schedule. Sometimes every 3 or 4 months I have one of those really killer trips and it's even been worse than that before, where I've got like this country, then I go back to that country, then I come back here, and it gets pretty intense.
Okay, final thing, Greg, and then we'll let you go, and we really appreciate the time and the insight. A lot of people say, this is the overall sentiment. Jon Jones has changed. He's a different guy now. The Bentley, the Nike deal, all this stuff, it's gone to his head. He's changed as a fighter. He forgot about what got him here and, taking fights on short notice and stepping up and all this stuff. You've been in there with him for the last few years. You know him better than anyone. Has Jon Jones changed, or are we just viewing him in a different way?
Jon hasn't changed, I don't think at all. I think that he did something that was not unprecedented. Again, remember that just a few days later, Lyoto did the exact same thing. He said there's not enough time to prepare. So it's not like Jon is reinventing the wheel. It's just the emotion surrounding the event that colors people's ideas, I think. Because if it wasn't, then people should be screaming at Lyoto right now. Why aren't you're the number one contender? Why aren't you stepping up to fight? Nobody does that because that makes sense. Lyoto wants to be ready, and rightly so. I think he's wise to do so, to be 100% ready to fight Jon. So it's not that Jon's changed. It's not that anything's changed. It's that he, 3 days is a lot to ask of anybody. And I think he made the right decision.
Greg, we really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being as classy as always. And good luck to you in Manila. And good luck on September 22nd when Jon Jones faces Vitor Belfort.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right, there he is. Greg Jackson joining us from Albuquerque, New Mexico, the home of Jackson Winklejohn and the home to great fighters like Jon Jones and Donald Cerrone and Andrei Arlovsky and many, many others. And Andrei Arlovsky is fighting Tim Sylvia for the 4th time at 1FC number 5 on August 31st, which is a pretty good card, by the way. So check that out. We have information on how you could check that out on MMAfighting.com. There's banners everywhere.